Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 15 of the Corcoran the podcast, where we're going to start off today with an NBA Finals preview. This is being live streamed on YouTube, live streamed on Twitch as well. I'm your host, Sam Corcoran, as always joined by Joel Pettit, and joined today by a special guest, Celtics superfan, Austin Barrick. Guys, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Excited to have our teams in the NBA Finals. It's been everything that's on my mind for the last couple days.
Yeah, Sunday night was a night I'll never forget. Celebrating with my friends, and hopefully in a 2-3 weeks, the celebration will continue in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, that was I gotta admit, Austin, that was I feel like that game was that had to be one of the best game sevens I've seen in a minute. I know there's been plenty of better game sevens, but that was just I felt like wire to wire. It was like nobody wanted the game for what it felt like. But overall, Celtics kind of won. Kyle Lowry was kind of not doing his job for Miami, even though I think everyone in the world hated Kyle Lowry for that game. I know you were texting me all the time. I hate Kyle Lowry. I hate Kyle Lowry. He was just messing it up for Miami as well.
Yeah, I can't wait to not see Kyle Lowry on the basketball court. It definitely wasn't a great game 7 because he had, Lowry flop around and Butler was the only guy really going. Bam had his moments too, but the Celtics played well up until the last, 3.5 minutes where it was awful to watch. But yeah, glad we finally, got over the hump.
Yeah, and the Celtics, it wasn't just this 7-game series against Miami. They had a pretty rough series against Milwaukee as well to get here. Overall, I think what you've seen in the Celtics team ever since you and I went to that game, Austin, this team has completely turned it around this all season long. They have a ton of grit in them. They don't give up. After a loss, you said it best, after a loss.
6-0 in the playoffs. They're 6-0 in the playoffs after a loss. They rebound.
Yeah, they rebound really well. I think one time I texted you Dan, that's a brutal loss, and you were not worried at all. Ime Udoka knows how to turn it around. So yeah, I think this team they're a very gritty team. They're one of the more underrated teams, I have to say. Now they're at the finals, people are starting to take note, but throughout the season, people were like, "Oh, Celtics Nets, this could be close." They just blew through the Nets. I think Milwaukee was probably favored against them. Miami, I think they were favored against Miami after that, but I felt like Milwaukee was probably the team that could have beat them, and they were able to get through.
Right. When Brooklyn beat Cleveland in the play-in game, that night, Brooklyn opened as the favorites against us, and then, that quickly changed by game 1, and we swept them, although all those games were pretty close. And then Milwaukee, we were favored, and after game 1, we were the underdogs. We responded in that game 6, Jason Tatum, fourth quarter. And then we were also favored against Miami. And, we battle tested against these last 2 series have, taken years off my life. But man,
yeah,
it's all been worth it to get to this point, and I can't wait.
Yeah, overall, I mean, it was a great run from Boston in the playoffs, and I think, they're here. I think they deserve to be here. And so do the Warriors. I think, Joel, obviously, you and I have been watching every game this postseason.
Yep.
It's safe to say they kind of breezed through the Western Conference. Maybe besides the Memphis series was a bit rough, but they breezed through Denver. Dallas was probably the easiest series they had. Memphis was a bit rough, but they got over that hump. And it really didn't look like at any point against Memphis that they were not going to win that series. It really looked like that was their series from the get-go.
Yeah, we got a little fortunate, I feel like, especially with Dallas and Denver playing heliocentric offenses. Everything for those teams run through Jokic and Luka respectively, and that's a lot easier to guard because less attention has to be paid to other guys. You just got to focus on slowing one guy down and making one guy work. Memphis is more of a collected team, and their perimeter defense is a lot better, so I think that is more of a better blueprint of how we're going to be tested against Boston, because I think Boston's obviously more talented, but it's similar in that they're a deep team in that they have 3 or 4 guys that can make something happen offensively as opposed to just the one guy. And they play rugged defense even better than Memphis.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this team, I know we've been kind of saying it throughout the playoffs that the other teams we've been playing aren't that deep. This Boston team is deep. They have guys off the bench that can do well. Their starting lineup has been playing, just grinding it out all game. And they have the stamina and the strength to do it. This is what is this, Austin? Is this Tatum's third or fourth Eastern Conference Finals, something like that?
This is Tatum's third. It's
Celtics fourth.
Celtics fourth, yeah. Smart's been in four. It's the bubble. This one, 2018, and then 2017, which was an awful team.
That was the one where Isaiah Thomas was hurt.
Yes, we had Jay Crowder, Avery Bradley, probably like Amir Johnson starting. It was unbelievable.
Gerald Green was on that team.
Yes, Gerald Green. Yeah, in the Bulls series when we were down to also Rondo getting injured. But Sam, you made it. I don't think that we're necessarily like a deep team. Like kind of played 7 guys. He took out Pritchard and Tice in the Heat series. Probably concerned about the defensive matchups. I expect that both of them will play in this Warriors series, especially if Peyton comes back for you guys to throw Pritchard like that kind of matchup.
Pritchard did play a lot in the game that we went to.
Yes, the game we went to. Yeah, we all kinds of clowns were on display for the Celtics. That was in the height of the COVID breakout.
Enes Kanter, Josh Richardson. Your guy,
Romeo Langford started.
I know. That was crazy.
Yeah.
And then he got traded.
Yeah. I think I want to circle back to Joel's point, though. He made a good point about, by the way, I was completely wrong about the Mavericks. I thought that they could take you guys. But yeah, it was pretty clear early on that you guys really do well against, as Joel said, a heliocentric offense. Memphis, I thought, would give you more of a test. I know they had like your number in previous years. I know they beat you guys in the playing game last year, and then game, what was it, 5? They won, but they were up by 55 points at one point. And in game 6, I was watching you guys were turning it over. I'm like, man, like this Memphis team is kind of taking you to the brink. But I think from the point that you guys haven't lost to, when you're healthy, you haven't lost to any team besides LeBron in this whole like that's crazy to me, and I think you guys should be rightfully favored in this series.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up the turnover point, and I think I'm not going to segue into the Warriors keys yet because I want to talk about the other Warriors Celtics matchup in March. But the turnovers have been killing us throughout these playoffs, and I think Joel, you can attest to that has been our downfall at some points.
It's our kryptonite. Part of it is just a symptom of the offense we run. It's a motion offense, and it's a lot more variance for, passes being astray, tougher passes to make. But yeah, there have been games in this police playoffs where it's just like painful. The quality of turnovers and the amount, it's like that they are our biggest form of kryptonite. They're what kills us the most.
100%. And I want to talk. We talked about a lot about that game in Boston, but let's talk about the game in Golden State. This happened on March 16th,
where Marcus took out Steph.
This is the game where Marcus Smart took out Steph Curry. So, and looking at the box score, Jordan Poole led the Warriors that night there was only 2 double-digit scores for the Warriors that night. Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson. You didn't have Steph Curry. They had to play basically every bench player. Where Quindary Witherspoon got 15 minutes. Spoon, yeah, our boy.
And Draymond was out, right? I think
Draymond played 22 minutes.
Oh, Draymond was back. I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was right after he'd come back.
Yeah, this is one of his first games back. Meanwhile, for Boston, you said it. Peyton Pritchard could be a key factor in this series. 18 minutes, 10 points against us off the bench. One of 4 double-digit scores, including Tatum, Brown, and Smart having 20 plus. You got solid. Over Grant Williams had an off night. He didn't play in the first game as well. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in this final series now that he's back, now that he's fully healthy. Al Horford, only 6 points in 32 minutes against the Warriors this game. Another really non-factor. Will be interesting to see what he did because he didn't play in that other game. But overall, you look at these two teams in both the games, and I think the one thing that stands out to me, for Boston, I think it's just the same guys really doing what they've been doing all year. It was really you saw the same guys. You had Tatum, Brown, Smart, Pritchard. Really, those 4 guys really stepped it up throughout both of those games. And I think that was really the difference for Boston, especially in the second game. In the first game, you saw Curry, you saw a lot more Wiggins. Wiggins did not play this game. I just realized that. He was out against. So that was another key factor. Wiggins played really well in Boston, did not play in San Fran. So definitely two somewhat there's some similarities and there's some differences between the matchup. But I think now you come to the finals, I think it's going to be a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, I think that. Joey,
no, you got it. You got
cool. Yeah, I don't think you can take away too much from either of those games. Now, Sam, now that you jog my memory, Wiggins did kill the Celtics in that December game. That was very annoying to watch.
I think he led scoring that game, or it was either him or Curry, but I think they might have had the same amount, maybe.
I think it may have been Steph, but Wiggins was good.
Yeah. He had 27 or something like that.
Yeah, he had a crazy first half. And then at some points of that Mavs series, it was like the reincarnation of Scottie Pippen. And then, yeah, the Celtics, that first game you can't take away. And then once Curry got hurt, and I know we set the tone for that game early on, which is what we liked. It was basically a classic second half of the season Celtics during the middle of that turnaround. When Curry went out, I don't think you can draw too many conclusions. These teams have been peaking. I think, deservedly so. These are the 2 best teams. I think Grant Williams, though, Sam, he has not been injured. I think he's been one of our few guys who has not been injured. Rob
he did not play. He did not play in the game we went to, and I vividly remember you saying that he was injured.
He was probably in like COVID protocols or something.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, because that was the whole COVID outbreak for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, Horford and Grant were out. I assume those were COVID related.
Yeah, I would have to, because then the Warriors had that outbreak right after that game, and the Celtics had an outbreak as well. So that was the whole like the whole super spreader game.
Yeah, Tatum got it right after. Yeah, that was a whole thing. And then like game 1 in Miami, Horford gets a COVID thing, which I guess the anti-Celtics people are quick to forget. But I think I don't think you can draw too many conclusions from these 2 games. Because these 2 teams are, I think the Celtics they won't play as well as what that game in March was, and I think for the Warriors they're a very intelligent team, and Kerr will know how to tell the guys how to respond and all that. So I don't think you can draw too many conclusions from these games.
Agreed.
I agree, and that was my point I was going to make. Apart from that, it's just the difference in, you kind of mentioned, difference in personnel. For this series, Warriors are close to as healthy as they've been because we're hopefully getting some bodies back, and the Celtics in some of those games were missing guys. So, it's not really fair to judge 2 regular season games with missing personnel composed as opposed to finals games. There's just a different level of intensity and effort that's going to be put forward. So, I think for people saying stuff based off this season, it's like, okay, well, Steph played 10 minutes in one of the games and the Celtics were missing a starter and likely their best bench player in the game in Boston. So let's see how it goes when both teams, have their troops.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good segue into some keys for this series. I know there's plenty to talk about, but I thought it would be a good idea if everybody gives 1 key for each team. We can discuss that, break that down, do all that. Let's start with the Warriors. And Joel, since you're the Warriors analyst on here, I'll give that to you. What's your 1 key for the Warriors against the Celtics?
1 key for the Warriors against the Celtics. I think my key, honestly, is actually, no. Sam, you start. I have to think. The obvious one I think is turnovers, but I think that would be too easy. That'd be too low.
Yeah, I was gonna say turnovers, but that's kind of easy. I think the 1 key, and this is gonna sound, it might sound basic as well, but a bit more complex. I think and it's something that's kind of similar to what the Warriors have been doing throughout the postseason. They've been locking up the guys around the main guy. Now the Celtics, I don't think they don't really have a main guy. It's really Tatum. You have a ton of depth. Jaylen Brown could be there. Al Horford can make some moves. Grant Williams had a phenomenal game 7 against Milwaukee. So there's not really any guy you can pick from that. With that being said, though, I think Jaylen Brown could be a superstar in this series. I really do. I think the Warriors are going to have a ton of focus on Jason Tatum. You're going to put Draymond Green on him or Andrew Wiggins.
And probably Wiggins.
Wiggins, yeah. Jaylen Brown, I don't think that's a matchup you would put Draymond Green on. I think you probably put Draymond Green on a Grant Williams or an Al Horford maybe. And I think overall you're going to have Klay Thompson or Steph Curry or Jordan Poole lock up Jaylen Brown. And that's going to be my key to the series. As part of something I've been preaching all postseason long, where it's locking up the primary options, I think you have to keep a special eye on Jaylen Brown. And I think that you could also use that as a key for the Celtics is give the ball to Jaylen Brown. Even though he's been having a phenomenal postseason, that's what they've been doing. But I know it's very specific, but I think keeping an eye on Jaylen Brown throughout the series and making sure you keep the ball out of his hands, he's really not that – I mean, or making sure he just doesn't shoot. He's not good at dribbling. He's a very sloppy dribbler. So if you can get him in a situation where he has the ball, he's the primary on-ball person, and he's not shooting. You want to make him more of a point guard. It's kind of like that. I mean, it's kind of hard to do because – it all depends on what the Celtics game plan is, but the Warriors are going to have to lock him up somehow because he's great off the ball. When he gets the ball, he can shoot, but when he's on the ball for too long, he can get a bit sloppy. I think that's going to be your key. You get a ton of turnovers, you limit the scoring, and you overall can just get a massive advantage.
That's a good point. Here's a point of mine. I think if you're Kerr, not being afraid to go to the Draymond at 5 lineup. Boston's best lineups throughout most of the year have featured obviously Rob Williams and Horford. And part of the beauty of Rob Williams is that he's so good as a rim protector, often because they'll put him on a guy that's not much of an offensive threat. But if you have the Draymond at 5 lineup and Draymond has the ball, who are you going to stick Rob Williams on to help off? If Draymond has the ball, you don't want to put Rob Williams on the ball because Draymond could likely get by him. And then if you have Poole, Steph, Wiggins, and Klay around him, there's no guy to help off of, really. So I think going to that lineup quickly could give Boston a little bit of a headache and make them change what they want to do. And that's obviously what you want. You want to play your game and make the other team adjust. And I think if you go to that earlier maybe than possible, or just not having any fear of playing that lineup, I think that it could work to our advantage.
Now, before I let Austin talk, I just see a comment right here. Has anyone compared you to Derek Carr?
Derek, what?
Or maybe they're talking about Joel, I guess.
I mean, I don't think either of us particularly look like Derek Carr.
I mean, the fact that I mistook Austin for that. I mean, I think it's just more Joel. I usually have Joel on, which is why I assumed Austin, but thought I'd bring that up. Interesting.
I mean, if I were a professional quarterback like Derek Carr, awesome. But look, you guys both make good points. Joel, the Robert Williams point is key because Ime will recognize that and he'll take him out. And also, Rob's been injured this entire playoff series. Remember, he entered the playoffs on a meniscus tear. He's been in and out. Like literally every time he lands off of like one of his alley oops or a shot block, I'm scared. Like I'm so nervous for him. I'm like the protective father. Like Rob, please don't get injured, but he always does. And so I think that's where you put Grant Williams on Draymond. To your point, Joel. Sam, about Jaylen Brown, I think that's key. And my key for the Warriors as a whole here is make the ball handlers of Boston uncomfortable. We don't really have many guys who are actually good at dribbling the basketball, which is crazy to say because they're in the NBA. If I'm the Warriors, if I'm Steve Kerr, and he's a smart guy, smart coaching staff, I'm having you guys look at the tape of what Wesley Matthews and PJ Tucker did to our ball handlers early on in those series. And also what Gabe Vincent did to Derek White, making him uncomfortable. And we're at our worst.
Derek White did not look very good against Miami.
Who?
He in the later in the series, White looked a lot better. In game 6 and 7, he was not bad.
Game 6, Derek White was almost the hero if we had won that game.
Oh, yeah.
He hit the 3 to put them up. I think it was 97-94 with like 3 minutes left. And watching that, I'm like, oh, Boston's going to win. I was like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. As a Celtics fan, even when he hit that, I knew we were probably going to lose. But yeah, just make our ball handlers uncomfortable. I think that's where Pritchard can probably play a little bit more. Even Tatum, he's a tighter handle than Brown, obviously, but when he gets into traffic, that's where it's tough. And the help defense of these playoff teams has been crazy on Tatum. That's why you've seen like some of these halves, he doesn't shoot as much. He has to facilitate and make those plays. You saw the end of the Miami game on Sunday.
They were doubling him right away. They were just doubling him right away and making him get rid of the ball. It's the same. Teams do it with Steph often. It's like trap him, almost close to the corner of half court, and then it's just he makes the smart pass. He just gets rid of it and gets his team in a spot where they play 4-on-3. But I mean, it's tough for your guy to cook when they're constantly doing that.
Yeah. It's to a point where, you know, I almost trust Al Horford, you know, when we can initiate the offense kind of with him sometimes. But also if Payne comes back, that'll be another presence. But Jaylen Brown, it's an experience to watch him dribble the ball. Like when he gets up in the air, he's great. He's good at finishing, but to get to that point of finishing, he's not always that great. So and also Wiggins, seeing what Wiggins did to Luka, making his life difficult. I'm a little scared about that. So the Wiggins Draymond thing, you guys are a very good defensive team, so I'd be scared about that as a Celtics fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Wiggins is in particular. I still think that Draymond Green is our best defensive player. But then you look at Andrew Wiggins as the guys he can lock up. I think the versatility of his defense is better than the versatility of Draymond Green's defense. And I think in situations, especially in this, where you have to lock up a guy like Jason Tatum, a guy who has the ball a lot, that's where you put Andrew Wiggins on. I think you'll probably see Draymond Green on. I would think you'd see him on Grant Williams and Al Horford. And the reason I'm saying Al Horford and not Robert Williams is I believe that Al Horford could get a lot more time in this series instead of Robert Williams. I think they want that. Yeah, they need that offensive threat. You look at the other Warriors postseason series. Steven Adams, more of a defensive guy. I mean, he didn't really do too much. Dwight Powell didn't do anything. And then Nikola Jokic, I know he's Jokic, but offensive-minded center. And he was really the guy that kept the Nuggets in the series, helped them win that one game. So I think you're going to see a lot more offensive-minded play from the Warriors because it's a team that they don't use much down low. They're a team that chucks threes. They need people. The Celtics are going to need guys that have presence on defense. Like when we're talking defense, you don't need a guy like Robert Williams in the paint. You need to have a guy that can move around a lot. I think that's Al Horford. When the Celtics are on offense, Kevon Looney has been phenomenal on defense this series, and you're going to need a guy who can move around again. So I just think you need a match up to the Warriors well, and I think with Rob Williams, it's not going to match up as well as Al Horford, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also he's just not been healthy, which is really unfortunate because that lob presence we have is a game changer offensively. So it's unfortunate. We'll see how his knee responds here. I do like how the finals is set up where you get 3 days off every time, but between game 3 and 4, so that's nice. But yeah, that's my 2 cents there.
There you go. All good keys for the Warriors, all different in some way, but overall, I think we can all agree that they're all really defensive minded keys. So
yeah,
overall, I think. Why is my screen loading? Are we good now? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, my screen was just loading real quick. Let's move on to the Celtics. Austin, we'll start with you since you're the Celtics fan here. Why don't you give us a key for the Celtics?
All right, my key I wrote down was generate good looks in critical possessions. This has been an issue that the Celtics have struggled with all season. Obviously, the first half was a mess. 18-21 start. Even in that, man, like that second half, I was watching a car crash in slow motion. I kept waiting for the Heat to take the lead. Whenever the game gets close, we seem to just be incompetent offensively. For whatever reason, we settle with these Jason Tatum isolation plays, or Jalen or Smart decides he's the hero or something. Like, it's ridiculous. If we can just get some off-ball actions with Jalen, when Jalen's coming off like a down screen, he's got momentum. That's when we're playing well. Or lob it into Horford and he can make a pass somewhere. Just whatever reason, obviously Tatum's a good isolation player, but too much of it, like 4, 5, 6 possessions in a row. And that's where the Warriors, and you guys know this better than anyone, they go on these runs that just put you away like that. And we can't, the margin of error is too small for us to just throw away offensive possessions like that.
Absolutely. I think you just have to make sure to do that throughout the series. And I think the offensive margin of error, you have to really use this offense efficiently throughout the series. And I think you bring up a good point with that, because if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to score those points, the Warriors are just going to come back and bite you right in the ass. You've seen that in the Dallas series where they were missing a ton of threes in game 3. Kleber had nothing, and the Warriors won that game. And the score I was actually a lot closer than people think it was. It was a 9-point game. Dallas just looked absolutely atrocious that game. And that's why it didn't feel close at all. So overall, I definitely agree with you that I think the Celtics offense needs to perform well. But on the other hand, I'm going to go with a more defensive key, and that is that they have to like make sure this is a bit of another complex one, but make sure that there's a ton of guards on the Warriors, a ton of 3-point shooters. You have Steph, Poole, Clay. Obviously, those are the main three. You have Gary Payne Jr. is more of a defensive-minded guy, so I'm not going to talk about him too much. And then at forward, you might have Otto Porter coming back. Andrew Wiggins, definitely still a slasher, an offensive threat. I think it's really on. What was that reaction, Joel?
You left out a particular forward.
Draymond Green.
No.
Bielitsa.
Dude.
Oh, your guy, Kuminga, obviously.
Yes, God.
I mean, hey, we don't know how many minutes he's going to get, though. So
he should get some.
We'll see about that. But I think my key for the Celtics is perimeter defense. And I think you really just have to make sure that when it comes to the 3-point line, the Warriors are taking poor shots there because that's where they really thrive. And against Dallas, it was really the Dallas defense did not live up to that, and that's why the Warriors blew past them. The Celtics should learn from that, and they have to commit to this, making sure whether it be moving the ball around the guard's hands, whether it be locking up the guards and making them pass inside to Looney or pass inside to Draymond Green. I know Looney had that 20-point performance, but that's not what the Warriors want every night. Looney is the guy who's manning the middle and more of he's not getting many offensive minutes. Overall, I just think you have to, and he's going to be moving around a lot. So overall, I just think you have to play great perimeter defense if you want to win this series.
Very solid point. I think the number one question mark I have is just the health of Robert Williams. I mean, with the time off he's getting, you wonder what percentage he's got. That game 7, he didn't have a lot of run, and he didn't look great. So I want to see how he looks early on in this series. But from a more certainty and like a guy that we think is more healthy, my biggest point for the Celtics is just Marcus Smart's play in general. The Celtics are the only team since Kerr has taken over as a coach that has had a winning record against the Warriors. And a big point of that, weirdly, is I think Marcus Smart always plays Steph incredibly well. He does play him really, really well. And
they were one of the 2 teams to beat us at home that 2015 season, 2016 season. I just want to interrupt that real quick.
Yeah. Yep. Very true. Both those games against Boston that year were great. It was the double OT game and that game. They always just play as well. And then, what was I going to say? Smart, just chasing Steph around picks. I mean, Steph's obviously, he's the nucleus of our offense. So if Smart, it's like what you want to do with all the great players. If you can just make him work that little bit harder, so by the end of the game, his legs aren't there quite as much, or, forces Steph into more turnovers. Like you said, turnovers are fucking the bane of our existence. So if he can do that and bring that and his ankle can hold up, because I was a little worried because in game 6, Smart really didn't look like he had it. But in game 7, obviously, he led the team in shots, which I think Celtics fans kind of would have a heart attack hearing that. But, he did keep him in the game. That third quarter, he hit 2 threes, I think. And then he had a ridiculous, little off-balance floater that I did not think was going in, but he got it to drop. I mean, he's really streaky. And honestly, I think if you're the Warriors, you want to game plan that to your advantage. I think you want to try and take Brown and Tatum out of possessions and make Smart try and shoot threes to beat you. And I think that comes back to my point. If Smart's hitting 37% of his threes this series, that could be more of an issue. If he's, in the low 30s, then, advantage us. So I think Smart is the big X factor for Boston on both sides, with his ability to guard Steph and his ability to shoot them out of games and also bite you by hitting open shots.
And I want to just add on to that, kind of like your game plan with Smart. And there was something you said that it kind of made me think that it made me realize that this is the one series where I don't really know how the Warriors are going to game plan against Boston. In Dallas and Denver, you really had a game plan where Luka and Jokic, obviously those are the nucleus of those offense, and you kind of make sure that they cannot work the ball around that much. I mean, Memphis, you kind of had it kind of switched up a little bit where it was you got to lock up Morant, you got to make sure I mean, you kind of just got to make sure you keep eyes on Miranda all the time. When he went out, it was really just it was really an offensive game plan, not defensive. But for the Warriors in this case, you really don't know how it's going to go. And I think Boston, really going to depend on how Boston game plans it. And you said with Marcus Smart, what if they might run a lot through him throughout the series on offense and defense? And I think that could be something that the Warriors aren't prepared for. So I think however Boston game plans it, it's going to be a lot of game plans switching up all the time. It's not going to be one consistent game plan. I know that's never really the case in basketball where it's one consistent game plan, but it kind of felt like it throughout the Warriors playoffs. This one, I think every game is going to be a new game. Every game is going to be a new start, and I think it's going to be a bloodbath to the end. I know you wanted to say something, Austin, so go ahead.
Yeah, great points all around. I want to touch on, like Sam, like it's almost as if the Celtics are the best team you guys have played so far. I mean, every single game of these last two series for the Celtics have been different. All right. I know you Warriors, you guys have kind of like breezed through these series. We've been battle tested. And then your point about the Mavericks, I told you like that second half of game 2, I'm like, oh my God, nobody's stopping this Warriors team. That's like the epitome of basketball right there. But I just went back. I watched the highlights. It was mostly the Warriors guys, Poole, Steph, Clay even, and Wiggins just driving by the Mavs because they have bad perimeter defense. And you said the Celtics can learn from that. We're just good at that. We're just good at defense. We're good. Like you guys, like we'll pick up fouls and stuff. But Poole's a very finesse kind of player. I think our physicality, if the refs allow us to like play physical against them, we'll hurt them a little bit. And Joel, like your point about, the Celtics and Smart always playing the Warriors well. It's true. And I couldn't believe the stats backed it up. We've only winning team against them since Poole took over. The Celtics, I know you guys have home court advantage, but that's almost like in our favor. We've been worse at home.
Because you guys are almost borderline historic on the road these playoffs.
Yeah, I know you guys are undefeated at home, right? But we're
undefeated at home, a historic home stand versus a historic road stand, I guess. Yeah. Road team, I guess. I should say team, not stand.
Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting to see. I know I feel very confident you guys will take at least one of two in games 3 and 4 in Boston. I would be actually shocked if the Warriors didn't win one of those games, but. The Celtics it's the best team you guys have played. It's also, the best team we've played, although I thought the Milwaukee series was unbelievable. So I'm excited and yeah, this will be a great series.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good segue into our series predictions. And I'll start first. I think game 1 will go the Warriors' way. I'll say that right off the bat. I think the Warriors will win game 1. Game 2, that's really the toss-up game right there. It's gonna come down to games 2 and 5. I think is whoever wins the series. I think I see Boston winning game 3, Golden State winning game 4, and I also see Golden State winning games 2 and 5. I'm gonna go Warriors in 5. I know it's a very bold pick. Half of me wants to say Warriors in 6, and the Celtics get either game 2 or game 5. But I also here's the other thing is I don't see this series going to 7 games, but I also don't see the Warriors not closing the series out at home. And I think it's hard for me to say 6. It's too hard for me to say 7, I feel like. So I'm gonna go 5. I'm gonna go Warriors in 5.
My pick's different.
I know you guys definitely disagree with me, but
yeah, my pick's different. You all throughout the playoffs, you've always picked like Warriors in 5. I feel like has there been I went
Warriors in 5 for Denver. I went Warriors in. I think I said Warriors in 6 for Memphis.
We both said Warriors in 6 for Memphis,
and then I went Warriors in 4 with Dallas, and then you said 5. I said it was going to be a sweep against Dallas.
Oh God, I said 6, but so
I was closer to that. They almost swept that.
Even though it's like kind of the safe pick, here's how I'm with Sam in that I think game 1. I would be surprised if we didn't win game 1. We've had a lot of time off, and it's going to be at home. I think game 2 is a big X factor game. I would not be honestly surprised if this went back to game 5 in Chase tied 2-2, and then the Warriors win, and then the Warriors win 2 in a row. That's how I'm going to say it goes, and I think we win at 6.
Fair enough.
I think we can close it out in Boston, and I think the reason I say that is that game 6 that Boston gave up to Miami, that was telling because that Miami team was a one-man team pretty much. I mean, Bam wasn't doing that much. I mean, Butler had, what do you have, 47? I mean, we're obviously going to be much more of a diverse offensive attack. And I think Boston, with their just kind of quips they can get late in the game, I think we can take advantage of that. Did I say quips? I meant yips. Yeah.
Yes. You won't find me making a prediction, that goes back to, my awesome curse, and my friends would kill me if I make a prediction. And, we have all these superstitions going. So I won't make a prediction, but I will say this. I agree with Joel in the fact that if the Warriors do win the series, I think it's in 6 games. That's the most likely outcome. I'm very fearful of how the Celtics will play at home. I think we're 3-4 at home if you exclude the Brooklyn series. I do agree with you guys. I would be very surprised if the Warriors do not win Game 1. I saw a stat in the last 26 years the home team has won Game 1 23 out of 26 times.
Wow.
Game 2,
interesting. I never knew that.
The Game 2 was where the Celtics have been down 1-0 these last 2 series, and after a loss, we're the greatest team of all time. And so I think Game 2, the Celtics bounce back. Game 3, I think the Warriors take. Game 4, the Celtics take. That's where Scott Foster will be reffing for us. So don't worry.
Oh no! Oh, I didn't. The extender.
Is he actually reffing this series?
Oh,
he should be.
Got it. He's got it.
He will be. With the he's one of the most experienced refs in the NBA. They'll give him 1 or 2 finals games for sure.
Exactly.
And then so I think it'll be tied 2-2 heading back to San Francisco, and that's right where we've lived. We've lived this for a month now. These 2-2 series, and then I think the winner of Game 5 wins the series. I think if the Warriors win Game 5, I think they win Game 6, as Joel said. But if the Celtics win Game 5, I think it's going 7, and at that point, it's anybody's game. But I hope it's 1-1 after 2, and I hope it's 2-2 after 4. So that's what I'll say.
Fair enough. I think I definitely think if Boston does not win at home, they're screwed. I think that's kind of obvious. But I also think that if you're Boston, you have to win 1 game everyone has to win at least 1 or 2 games on the road if they want to win this series. No matter that's going to be the key to who wins this series, and whoever gets that first one is going to have a massive advantage going forward. Guys, thank you so much for joining this finals preview. I had a lot of fun talking basketball with you. Getting a guest on, always fun. So glad you guys enjoyed it. Absolutely. Well, coming up, segment 2, talking about the Oakland Athletics. Jake and I are going to jump into that. Lots going on around the team. You guys will not want to miss out. Stay tuned.